The standoff between Australia and Turkey's bids to host next year's COP climate summit continues, with the Prime Minister today rejecting the Turkish president's offer to co-host the meeting. Mike Copage is a climate policy expert who runs CoTerran, a climate and security advisory group. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so this idea from Turkey that we do it all together, sounds all right. The Prime Minister's not a fan, though.
No, I don't think he's a fan anymore. I think these discussions are interesting because they've been going on for a couple of years, up until even June last year, or June of this year in Bonn, until UNGA in September. There were discussions around co-hosting that had been sort of out there. And I think what's happened is, at the last minute, now that Turkey continues to not really have allowed the ball to advance any further than it has been for such a long time, it sounds like Australia is trying to flip the script and play brinkmanship itself, which is what Turkey had been doing in its own case.
Okay, how do you see Australia playing this game, like as you observe it, for our viewers who just really don't know about this stuff?
So the climate negotiations and the process to select who hosts the climate negotiations are an incredibly bureaucratic process because it's under the UN. However, it's a consensus-based process, which means there can be no dissent on who hosts the climate negotiations. Typically, someone always backs out. Someone always decides if there's two competing bids, there's a deal is struck, and there's a way to share responsibilities in a reasonable way. But the presidency of hosting COP itself is always by a single country. In this case, Australia has been engaging with Turkey in fairly good faith for some time to talk about ways that it can split responsibility, and Turkey has continued to advance the notion that it should be the rightful host of next year's negotiations. So I think in this particular case, what Australia has done, because this is really meant to be the first Pacific-hosted COP, co-hosted COP with Pacific Island countries, is it's decided it's either going to take it and take it with all of the potential cost, all the risk, but also the potential for legacy and advancement in advancing climate rules, ambition, negotiations under the most important multilateral process we have on climate, or defer that to Bonn in Germany, which is nobody's favored outcome.
Well, I think it's not even Bonn's favoured,
no.
Right? They're not really into this.
No, Germany does not want to do this, and they've been explicit about that even over the last week in Brazil.
Okay. So when's this all going to get resolved? There's some reporting that it could even take longer than this coming week.
It's meant to be, the last date is meant to be by the end of this week. Climate negotiations sometimes go overtime. So perhaps it could be the case that it goes overtime in Brazil. Because Germany, again, probably doesn't want to have this, there may be some interest in trying to find a deal at the end of the day. But I think at this point, from reading Australia's positioning and kind of flippant script really in the last week, I do think that they're trying to push that to happen as soon as possible this week to give some clarity finally on this. There
are lots of different figures being spoken about. No one's really properly confirmed it, but it is a rather pricey thing to hold.
Yes. Yeah, there's no getting around that. I don't think there's any getting around that the largest multilateral climate negotiations every year that set our global rules on climate change are expensive, but so are the Olympics. One of them delivers the rules by which we agree around how we avoid the worst crisis that we could face in terms of a destabilizing crisis, and the other is really interesting, really important, really good for sports and sports diplomacy, but it is the Olympics. These are both expensive events. They both return some value, but they are expensive, and some country has to host them. Someone has to step up and not be a free rider to make it advance. And the choice is either to be at the forefront of that to help drive the agenda, or to be in the backseat and let those rules be placed upon what is essentially what we all follow.
Okay, just quick answer. We've only got a minute left on the show. Do you think Australia's going to win it?
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes.
Really?
It's going to win it. I'm just going to go out there only because I know that everyone is hedging their bets, but I think this is the right call. I think it should happen, and I hope that it does. So that's why I'm going to say yes, not because I think I actually know it's going to happen. Well, no one knows.
No one knows because it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the real truth of how we operate in this world. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
And that's it for Afternoon Briefing for today.